Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back here to today's edition of Advanced Bass Fishing, and really appreciate you guys coming by the channel to check today's video out. We're going to be talking about cold fronts and how cold fronts affect bass, like before, during, and after they're coming through. This is a foundational piece of information everybody needs to know because, guys, I can tell you one thing: it's like frontal systems have a huge impact on how you fish, techniques that work, lures that work. So we're going to get into that in today's video, and think it's going to give everybody a little bit better understanding of how to make those adjustments, because weather is one of those things in fishing that just changes all the time, man. It's just one of the things you have to deal with, and you have to be prepared for it. So that's the topic of today's video. Also, guys, a couple of quick things before we get started. I just want to invite everybody to please check out my Fish the Moment lake map breakdowns. We've got our spring maps up on the website right now, guys. These are maps I build for Fish the Moment that gives you 40 GPS waypoints on all the main lakes across the United States. You can download them straight to your GPS unit with some tips and advice on how to fish each place. And also, guys, please check out my Tackle Warehouse link. We got a big spring fishing sale going on there in addition to my Blaukat's Corner page. I'll link all that stuff in the video description here if you guys want to look at it, and really appreciate that. Okay, cold fronts are a reality in fishing, and it took me a long time to learn how cold fronts affect bass, because I don't think when you start bass fishing, you start trying to assimilate experience in fishing, it takes a long time. It takes season after season after season to see the reproducible results that you get or don't get from fishing based upon cold fronts. Now, let me give you guys I'm going to give you a prime example of what I'm talking about here, how a front affects bass, and then we'll get into some tips and advice on what you can do with that. The biggest lesson I ever learned in my life is 1987. I was down at a Bassmaster Invitational down at Sam Rayburn Lake. This was the second or third Bassmaster event I ever fished, and this is the first time I'd ever been to Sam Rayburn Lake, and the water was high. It was probably 4 or 5 foot high, a lot of flooded bushes in the water. And prior to the tournament, the day before the tournament, we had perfect fishing conditions. It was warm, it was cloudy, there was a front on its way through, the front was coming through, there wasn't much wind. It was just a perfect fishing condition. Guys, and I started throwing a floating lizard, sort of, people don't fish them anymore, but it's basically like a floating worm. And I was tossing that floating lizard up around those shallow bushes. And guys, it was the most epic day of fishing I have ever had in my life. I had my hook cut off, but I was fishing this thing about 2 inches underneath the water, and the water visibility was like 4 foot clarity, so I could see the thing coming through the water every time. And I'd work that lizard real slow, like it'd go side to side just underneath the water. And guys, these big ones would come out of the bushes. They'd swim up in slow motion to this thing, open their big old mouth and grab that lizard and slowly start swimming away with it. And if it had been a tournament, guys, I'd have had an easy 30-pound bag. And a 30-pound bag back in the 80s was a huge deal. That was back before the norm that we see now. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, guys, that day I probably had 30 to 40 bass over 4 pounds that I saw visually come out and eat that thing, and I had to shake them off. I had the hook cut off. I couldn't even sleep at night. I mean, I was so pumped up. I just said, okay, I'm going to win this tournament. The only question in my mind was how much I was going to win it by. Was I going to win it by 10 pounds or 20 pounds or 30 pounds? I mean, I couldn't sleep. I was so excited to get out there. And of course, that night we had a cold front roll in, a bad cold front. And we get out there the next morning, the air temperature had probably dropped 20 degrees. We lost the clouds, it was bluebird sky, and the wind was blowing about 25 miles an hour out of the north the very next day. I went back to those same areas where I was getting them on that lizard. Guys, I never had a bite all day long. I went from having 30 or 40 bass over 4 pounds grab this lizard, and no telling how many smaller than that, to nothing, not a single bite on it. And that is a prime example of what I'm talking about as far as how the bass behave and their mood and their personality before a front and after a front. So just always remember that. So here's some things about it. It's like what you can use for your own fishing. It's like before a front rolls in. Now every front's different. You know, some fronts have wind with them, some fronts don't. Some have rain, some have different variations of clouds. Every frontal system is different. But most of the time, when you have a cold front moving into an area, it's usually, generally, it has like some southerly or westerly airflow to it. Generally, your air temperatures are normal or above normal. Usually there's some clouds coming in. It could be different type of clouds, but you can see clouds sort of starting to roll in, and your barometric pressure starts falling. And these are the conditions that make bass bite. It's like these are, for whatever reason, it has to do with something about the whole food cycle in a lake or whatever, you know, the mysterious part of that is. But bass bite really good before the front, and that's the time that you want to fish your aggressive lures, your active moving lures like your crankbaits, chatterbaits, spinnerbaits, topwaters. All that stuff works good, you know, before a front rolls through. Now, what happens after the front, again, depending upon the type of front it is, there's a major change. Usually, you always have a temperature drop. The temperature drop can be minor or major. You usually always have a wind direction change. Usually the wind is coming out of the north or northwest after a frontal passage. You may or may not lose your cloud. Some frontal systems, it'll bluebird off and you won't have a cloud for 3 or 4 days. Other frontal systems, it stays cloudy. And of course, you're going to have wind speeds in varying degrees. Some cold fronts you come through and they got high winds with them. Some cold fronts come through and you don't have any wind with them. And you usually have some type of a rising barometric pressure. Now, anytime that happens, guys, the mood and the personality of the bass is not conducive to feeding. It always gets tougher. You can catch them, but they're not near as aggressive. They don't tend to chase near as much. So therefore, your lures that work better after a front are usually your bottom lures, like your Cincos, your drop shots, your shaky heads, your jigs, football head jigs, anything that you fish on the bottom, because after a frontal passage, fish don't like to chase very much. Now, you can still catch a few fish on a reaction strike around targets, like burning a crankbait or something, or a spinnerbait right next to a lay down tree or something, possibly. But overall, it gets pretty tough with that. So when I try to give you tips on fishing and trying to, you know, fish react to different type of frontal systems, it's not as easy as just telling you this is the way it is and try this and it's going to work, because like I said, every frontal system is different. And also on top of the frontal system, there's other factors involved, because frontal systems are one thing with it in correlation with your water temperature and your water visibility, fishing pressure, whatever. But another thing that I have found out about fronts is that the warmer the weather, the less impact they have on the fish. Most of the time, if your water temperatures are over 75 degrees, and normally this is anywhere between, say, May to October in most lakes across the country, the frontal systems don't have that big of an impact on them. It's just like there's something about warmer water that does not impact those fish. The temperature range that you will get a huge effect from a cold front is when when the water temperature is between, say, like 45 to 60 degrees, or 45 to 65 degrees, which is normally anywhere between December to April. Those are the months of the year that cold fronts have a huge impact on the bass. So you can have a cold front come through in the middle of August, which normally you don't have a big temperature drop. It may cool off a little bit, but the fish don't really react to that much like they do in different times of the year. So I can tell you one thing about fronts, guys. Here's a little piece of advice I'll give you based upon that Sam Rayburn example, because I've also seen this year after year after year. If you're fishing a bait like a floating worm or a topwater or a fluke or anything that is near the surface, a swim jig or anything, once a cold front comes through, you need to change up. Those techniques will not work very good after a front comes through. Bass do not want to move and chase high up in the water column towards the surface after a front moves. So a good foundation for that is to stay away from your more active, aggressive moving baits after a front comes through. Throw them before, and then sort of finesse around and slow down after that front rolls through. So that's just a broad foundational approach, guys. There's other details to it, but that's for another video. But anyway, I hope that helps you guys catch some more, and we'll talk later.